I still remember the exact moment my marriage ended. It wasn't the day the divorce papers arrived, not even close. It was 5 months before that, a Tuesday night. I was sitting at our kitchen table in Denver, the quiet hum of the refrigerator filling the space. My wife, Sarah, looked at me, dead in the eye, and said, "My family always comes first. You're second. And you knew that when you married me." That line? It wasn't just words, it was a hammer blow to everything I thought we were building. It was the moment I realized I wasn't just an afterthought in our life together, I was explicitly ranked second. And the worst part? A part of me knew she was right. Not that I knew when we married, but that this was the reality I'd been living. But how did I get there? How did a love story become a ledger sheet? We'd been together for 7 years, married for 5. For most of that time, I genuinely believed I was building a future, a life, with Sarah. Turns out, what I was actually doing was unwittingly funding a family welfare program I never signed up for. Her parents, Robert and Karen, lived about 20 minutes away, constantly on the brink of losing their home, even though Robert had a steady job and Karen worked part-time. Then there was her brother, Kevin. 32, somehow always between jobs, but never between emergencies. And her sister, Jessica, married with 2 kids, always needing a hand with what she called unexpected expenses, which, if you paid any attention, were surprisingly predictable. I'm not some millionaire, you know? I work in IT management. I make good money, solid middle class, but I'm not pulling 6 figures. Sarah was a teacher, so she made less, but she contributed. Or, at least, I thought she did, until I started actually looking at where every dollar was really going. It began subtly, like these things always do. Robert needed a brake job for his car. Could I spot him $500 until next week? Kevin's landlord was threatening eviction. Could we just cover his rent, this once? Jessica's kids needed winter coats. Wasn't family supposed to help family? Karen's medication wasn't covered, only $300. And next week never came. Just this once morphed into every few months. Family helping family apparently meant me writing checks while everyone else sent thank you texts. I'm the kind of person who keeps spreadsheets. Not because I was plotting anything, but because I needed to see it, in black and white, to believe it was real. Over 3 years, I had given or loaned her family $24,000. That doesn't even count the dinners, the groceries I'd buy when we visited, the birthday and Christmas presents that were supposedly from us but always paid for by me. Sarah knew. Of course, she knew. But whenever I brought it up, she'd give me this look, like I was being petty. Like I was counting pennies while her family was drowning. Like wanting my money back somehow made me the villain in a story where I was supposed to be the hero. The birthday trip was supposed to be different. I'd planned it for months, a long weekend in the Rocky Mountains, at a resort near Lake Placid. I'd been squirreling money away in a separate savings account, one she didn't have access to. I'd learned that lesson the hard way. We were set to leave Friday morning. Thursday night, I came home from work and found her crying at the kitchen table. Kevin had called. He was in some kind of trouble, needed help right away. Could we cancel our trip and use that money instead? She'd already called the resort. I just stood there, my work bag still in my hand, watching her cry. And something inside me, something that had been bending and stretching for 5 long years, finally snapped. I said, no. I said, we're going on this trip. I said, Kevin is a grown man who makes his own problems. I said, I'm done. She stopped crying instantly. Her face went from sad to shocked to angry in about 3 seconds flat. She stood up, and that's when she said it. The line that changed everything, my family always comes first. You're second. And you knew that when you married me. Like it was obvious. Like it was written into our vows and I'd just forgotten. I looked at her for a long moment. This woman I'd loved for 7 years. This woman I thought I was building a life with. This woman who, apparently, had a ranked list of priorities, and I wasn't even in the top spot. I just said, "Good to know. Thanks for clarifying that." And then I walked upstairs and started packing my bag. She followed me, asking what I was doing. I told her I was going on my birthday trip. She said we couldn't afford it if we were helping her brother. I said, "That's not my problem anymore." She called me selfish. I said, "Maybe." So, I called my buddy, Chris, asked if he wanted a free weekend in the mountains. He said, "Hell yes." Friday morning, I picked him up, and we drove 4 hours north to a resort Sarah had already canceled without asking me. I spent my birthday weekend hiking, drinking beer, and not checking my phone. Chris asked what was going on, and I told him everything. He listened, then just said, "Man, you've been an ATM with a wedding ring." He wasn't wrong. When I got home Sunday night, the house was quiet. Sarah was in the bedroom. I could hear her on the phone with Karen. I unpacked, took a shower, and went to bed in the guest room. Monday morning, I called my bank. I removed her from my checking account. I removed her from my savings account. I removed her from my credit cards. I set up my direct deposit to go into an account with only my name on it. I calculated exactly half of our monthly bills, and that was all I was going to pay from now on. 2 days later, when she found out, she absolutely lost her mind. She couldn't believe I'd cut her off financially. I gently reminded her that she'd told me I was second place. I was just acting accordingly. She said I was punishing her for being honest. I told her, "No. I'm protecting myself from being used." Her family started calling me. Robert left 3 voicemails about how I was destroying his daughter's life. Karen showed up at my office crying about how I could be so cruel. Jessica sent a long text about family values. Kevin didn't say anything, but then again, he never did unless he needed money. Sarah thought I'd cool off. She thought this was just me being hurt and petty. She thought I'd come around, like I always did. She didn't understand that something fundamental had changed. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I was just done being second place in my own marriage. I was done funding other people's poor decisions. I was done being the solution to problems I didn't create. We lived like roommates for 3 weeks. Separate rooms, separate meals, separate lives. She kept trying to talk about it, but there wasn't anything left to say. She'd told me exactly where I stood, and I'd simply adjusted my behavior to match that reality. I thought maybe this was it. Maybe we'd just limp along until one of us moved out. Maybe we'd have a calm, adult conversation about divorce. Maybe we'd split everything 50-50 and move on. Then her family showed up again, on a Tuesday night, unannounced. All of them, Robert, Karen, Kevin, Jessica, and Jessica's husband. They sat in my living room, and Kevin was crying. Actual tears. That's when I learned about the $35,000. Kevin had gotten into some kind of trouble. The details were vague, but the number was specific. He owed $35,000 to some very serious people. People who'd already made it clear what happens when you don't pay. Robert was tapped out. Jessica had nothing. Karen was begging. And they all turned to look at me, like I was the solution. Like this was what I was for. Like this was my job. Sarah stood there, arms crossed, and said, "This is what family does. This is why we're supposed to put family first." I looked at all of them. At these people who'd been treating me like a bank for 5 years. At my wife who'd literally told me I was second place. And I said one word, "No." The room exploded. Karen started crying immediately, not quiet tears, but that loud, heaving sob that's meant to make you feel like a monster. Robert stood up and started pacing. Kevin put his head in his hands. Jessica was asking, "How can you be so heartless?" And Sarah just stared at me like I'd slapped her. I stayed seated. Stayed calm. And repeated myself, no. I'm not giving anyone $35,000. Robert turned on me with a look of pure rage. He said I was condemning his son to violence, maybe worse. That I had the money, that I could save him, that this was what being part of a family meant. I asked him why he couldn't take out a loan. He said his credit was maxed. I asked why Jessica couldn't help. She said they had their own problems. I asked why Kevin couldn't just go to the police. Everyone went quiet because, apparently, that wasn't an option, for reasons nobody wanted to explain. Sarah walked over and stood right in front of me. If you don't help my brother, she said, her voice shaking, I'm done. I'll file for divorce tomorrow. I looked up at her and said, okay. And I meant it. The room went silent for about 5 seconds. I think they were all waiting for me to crack, to back down, to pull out my checkbook like I'd done 100 times before. But I just sat there. Sarah's face went through about 6 different emotions: shock, disbelief, anger, panic, more anger, then back to disbelief. You can't be serious, she whispered. I am completely serious, I replied. You'd really let us lose everything over money? I wasn't letting anyone lose anything, I said. Kevin made his own choices, and those choices have consequences I'm not responsible for. Robert called me selfish. Karen called me cruel. Jessica said, you never really loved my sister. Kevin finally looked up and said, I could die. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you got into whatever mess this is, I said. I stood up and told all of them to leave my house. They didn't move at first. They just kept talking over each other, begging, threatening, guilt-tripping. So, I pulled out my phone. You can leave voluntarily, I said, or I can call the police and they'll help you leave. That finally got them moving. Sarah stayed, of course. She stood in the living room after her family left and told me I'd just destroyed her entire family. I told her her family destroyed themselves. She said I was supposed to protect them. I said I was supposed to be her husband, not her ATM. If you don't fix this, she warned, I'm filing for divorce. Go ahead, I said, and went upstairs. I heard her on the phone all night, crying to Karen, crying to Jessica, probably calling everyone she knew to tell them what a terrible person I was. I didn't care anymore. I was past caring. The next morning, I woke up and she was already gone. I went to work like normal, came home to an empty house. She'd taken some clothes and her laptop. I figured she was staying with Robert and Karen. 3 days went by with no contact. I thought maybe that was it. Maybe she'd actually file, and we'd be done. Then, on Saturday morning, I was backing out of my driveway, and Robert was standing behind my car. I got out and told him to move. He said we needed to talk. I said we had nothing to talk about. He said I was making a huge mistake. I said the only mistake I'd made was enabling everyone for 5 years. He said his son was in real danger. I said that wasn't my problem. And then he said something that made my blood run cold. You know, we helped you buy this house. That money was supposed to be a gift, but maybe we need to reconsider that. That's when I realized they were going to try to come after me legally. I got back in my car, drove to my office even though it was Saturday, and I started documenting everything. I pulled bank statements. I pulled text messages. I pulled emails. Every single transaction, every request, every time I'd paid for something I wasn't supposed to. I created a folder on my computer labeled evidence and started filling it. That afternoon, Sarah texted me, we need to talk. I didn't respond. An hour later, she texted again, I'm serious. We need to figure this out. Still no response. She called me 6 times. I didn't answer. Finally, she texted, fine. be that way. But this isn't over. Monday morning, I got called into HR. Someone had filed an anonymous complaint, claiming I was creating a hostile work environment, making inappropriate comments, making people uncomfortable. It was vague, but serious enough that HR had to investigate. I knew immediately it was her family. I sat through the interview, answered every question honestly, and told them I was going through a separation and suspected this was retaliation. They said they'd look into it. I went back to my desk and added this to my evidence folder. That night, I found my car keyed in the parking lot. Deep scratches down both sides. Thousands of dollars in damage. I filed a police report. I pulled security footage from the office building. The footage was grainy, but you could see a woman who looked a lot like Jessica walking past my car around lunchtime. Wednesday, Karen showed up at my office again, this time with Sarah. They cornered me in the parking lot. Karen was begging me to reconsider. Sarah was crying, saying we could fix this, saying she didn't mean what she said about divorce, saying we could go to counseling, saying we could work it out if I just helped her brother this one time. I looked at Sarah, really looked at her, and I realized I didn't recognize her anymore. Or maybe, I was finally seeing her clearly for the first time. I said, "You told me I was second place. I believed you. I'm done being second place in my own life." And I walked away. She grabbed my arm. I pulled away. Karen said, "Please, just think about what you're doing." I have been thinking about it, I told her. I've been thinking about it for 5 years. I'm done thinking. And I got in my car and drove off. I watched them in my rearview mirror, standing in the parking lot. Sarah was crying, and Karen was holding her, and I felt nothing. No guilt, no sadness, no regret, just relief. 2 days later, I got served with divorce papers. She was asking for alimony. She was asking for me to pay her legal fees. She was asking for half the house, even though I'd paid 70% of the mortgage. She was claiming financial abuse because I'd cut her off from my accounts. She was claiming emotional distress. She was claiming I'd isolated her from her family. It was all lies, but it was there, in legal language, on official paper. I called a lawyer that afternoon, a guy Chris had recommended. His name was Alex, and he was exactly what I needed, no nonsense, straightforward, and mean when he needed to be. I showed him my evidence folder. He spent an hour going through it. When he was done, he looked up at me, a small smile playing on his lips, and said, "She's not going to get a single penny." For the first time in weeks, I smiled back. Sarah tried calling me that weekend. I didn't answer. She texted, saying we should talk before lawyers got involved. I didn't respond. She showed up at the house on Sunday morning. I didn't open the door. She stood on the porch, yelling through the door that I was being unreasonable, that we could still fix this, that she loved me. I just turned up the TV and waited for her to leave. Her family started a new campaign. Robert left voicemails threatening legal action about the house money. Jessica kept driving by at odd hours. Kevin sent me a long, rambling text about how I was destroying innocent people. Karen tried to friend me on social media, which was honestly just weird. I blocked all of them. I saved all the messages. I added everything to my evidence folder. Alex filed our response. We denied everything. We counterclaimed for half the money I'd loaned her family. We included the spreadsheet as evidence. We included text messages where she admitted her family came first. We included my bank statements showing I'd paid 70% of all household expenses for 5 years. We included proof that she'd taken out credit cards in her name and used them to pay for her family's emergencies. We were going nuclear, and we had the receipts. 3 weeks later, we had our first court date, just a preliminary hearing to set timelines. But her whole family showed up, all of them in the courtroom like it was a funeral. Robert glaring at me, Karen crying quietly, Jessica whispering to Sarah, Kevin looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. I sat there next to Alex in my suit, calm, quiet, ready. When the judge walked in, I knew this was just the beginning. The actual trial was set for 2 months later, and those 2 months were the longest of my life. Sarah's lawyer kept trying to negotiate. They wanted me to pay spousal support for 3 years. They wanted me to cover her legal fees. They wanted me to give her 60% of the house equity. Alex just laughed when he read their proposal and sent back our counteroffer, 0 alimony, 50-50 split on everything, and she pays her own legal fees. They rejected it immediately. Sarah tried one more time to contact me directly. She showed up at my gym, waited in the parking lot until I came out. She looked terrible, like she hadn't been sleeping. Please, she said, can we just talk like adults? That's what lawyers are for, I told her, and got in my car. She stood there crying, but I didn't look back. I was done being manipulated by tears. Her family kept up their campaign. Robert left a review on my company's website claiming I was a fraud. I had to get corporate legal involved to remove it. Jessica created a fake social media account and tried to message my friends, claiming I was abusive. Nobody believed her because they all knew what had been going on. Kevin apparently skipped town because suddenly nobody mentioned him anymore. I assumed he either paid his debts or ran from them. Either way, it wasn't my problem. The day of the trial finally came. I took the day off work. I wore my best suit. I brought 3 copies of my evidence folder. Alex had prepared me for every question, every accusation, every manipulation tactic they might use. I was ready. Her whole family was there again, filling up the rows behind her table, like this was some kind of sporting event they were going to win through sheer numbers. My side was just me, Alex, and Chris, who'd taken the day off to support me. I didn't need a crowd. I had the truth. Her lawyer went first, painting me as a financial abuser who controlled everything, isolated my wife from her loving family, cut her off without warning as punishment for standing up for her family values, vindictive and cruel. It was a good story. Completely false, but a good story. Then Alex stood up, and calmly, methodically, he destroyed every single claim. He presented the spreadsheet showing $24,000 in loans that were never repaid. He presented bank statements showing I'd paid for 70% of our household expenses while Sarah spent her money on her family. He presented the credit card statements showing she'd maxed out cards to give money to her relatives. He presented text messages where she explicitly said her family came first and I was second. He presented my evidence of the harassment, the keyed car, the false HR complaint, the stalking. And then he presented one thing I didn't even know he had, a recording. Apparently, Chris had been at the house the day her family ambushed me about the $35,000. He'd stopped by to drop something off and heard the whole thing through the door. He'd recorded it on his phone. It wasn't admissible in court because of consent laws, but Alex had the transcript. Kevin admitting he owed money to dangerous people. Robert admitting their credit was destroyed. Sarah saying, "If you don't help my brother, I'm filing for divorce." And me calmly saying, "Okay." It was all there, in black and white. The judge read through everything. Asked a few clarifying questions. Looked at Sarah's lawyer, who had gone very quiet. And then she made her ruling. No alimony, no spousal support, no legal fees paid by me. A 50-50 split on all marital assets, and she strongly suggested Sarah drop the financial abuse claims unless she wanted me to countersue for defamation. It was everything we wanted, and more. Her family sat there in stunned silence. Karen was crying again, but this time nobody cared. Robert looked like he'd aged 10 years. Jessica was whispering angrily to her husband. And Sarah just stared at the table. She didn't look at me once. After the trial, Alex told me I should feel good, that this was a total victory, that most guys in my situation get destroyed in divorce court. And he was right. I should have felt triumphant. But mostly, I just felt tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of defending myself. Tired of being treated like the villain for refusing to be a victim. The house sold 3 weeks later. We split the proceeds exactly 50-50. I never asked for the $24,000 back, because honestly, I just wanted it to be over. I took my half and bought a condo downtown in Denver. Nice building, good gym, no memories of her or her family. I started over. I heard through mutual friends what happened to everyone. Robert and Karen ended up losing their house about 6 months later. Apparently, without my money propping them up, they couldn't keep up with payments. Jessica's marriage fell apart shortly after. Turns out, when you can't borrow money from relatives, you have to face your own financial problems. Kevin never came back to town, as far as I know. And my ex-wife moved into a small apartment, got a second job. From what I heard, her family blamed her for everything, for losing the golden goose, for being too honest about where I ranked, for ruining their comfortable setup. About a year after everything was finalized, I got a text from an unknown number. It said, "I hope you're happy. You destroyed my entire family." I knew it was her. I stared at that message for a long time, thinking about all the years of manipulation, all the money, all the lies, all the times I'd been made to feel guilty for wanting to be a priority in my own marriage. And I typed back, "Your family destroyed themselves. I just stopped being the tool they used to do it." Then I blocked the number. I'm doing fine now. Better than fine, actually. I got a promotion at work. I started dating again. I picked up hobbies I'd abandoned because there was never time or money. I reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with. I built a life where I'm not second place, where I'm not an ATM, where I'm just me, and that's enough. This whole experience taught me something important. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't revenge. It isn't anger. It isn't trying to hurt the people who hurt you. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is just stop participating in your own exploitation. Walk away and build something better. Because the best revenge isn't making them suffer, it's refusing to suffer yourself. And I haven't suffered in a long, long time. What do you think about this story?